Hey guys, on this video I'm going to be talking about the latest Perry Mason from HBO. So this is episode 4 and of course it's called chapter 4. And this week they sort of switched the main focus of the episode because it's actually, a lot of it is about Oliver, the attorney played by John Lithgow. And it switches largely to him, his story. It goes a little bit into like his background and his relationship with Perry Mason, how they are very close. They've known each other for a number of years. He basically discovered Perry Mason and gave him like his sort of his first opportunities to sort of break through and work together as like his private detective. And it sort of dawned on me with this episode then, I think what they're going to be doing is that ultimately I think Perry Mason, because he was given this start by Oliver, and because this is obviously like Perry Mason's origin stories, I think what we're going to get by the end of this series is then Perry Mason will step into Oliver's shoes. He will take his spot as like head attorney of this law practice. That's what they seem to be like heading for anyway, so I would think that's probably going to be the case. But besides that, it's just a very personal episode for the Oliver character, where we see the stress of this case really starting to get to him. He also has growing health problems, and we just see that get on top of him throughout the episode. And of course Lithgow's a really great actor, so he really gets this across very well. And I think the crux of what's happening in this episode is then he's trying to get Emily out on bail. Last week they of course slapped that massive sort of bail on her, which the husband refused to pay because he now kind of believes that she might have had something to do with it. So at one point in court, Oliver is able to argue then she's unsafe where she is and she should be moved. This is of course what happened in the last episode as well, where Drower sort of burst in on Emily being abused by the detectives, and it appeared certainly that they were trying to correct like a confession out of her. So Oliver persuades the judge to get Emily moved to another location, but the judge says then the bail still stands, so they would still have to come up with that money. So it's sort of good news, bad news in a way. And also in this episode, Oliver's kind of trump card, which he's trying to present, is this idea that there is a fourth man involved, and that there was a fourth man involved in the murders of obviously these crooks and of George as well, which obviously would cast suspicion over the whole case. Which obviously we know is the case. We know the detective did kill them off, which looks rather suspicious. So Oliver is sort of trying to call the bluff with the other side, with the Stephen Root character, and he's obviously putting a brave face to say, well, you don't have anything, but there's a little bit of pressure applied, but it is kind of up to Perry Mason and also Drella as like the private detectives to try and find something out. and they look for information throughout the episode without a great deal of success. One thing Perry Mason does do at one point, and again we're getting into some of his like classic sort of like noir kind of unconventional type tactics, where he forces like this coroner to do another examination of the body, that being George's body, because they sort of think that the examination was just rushed through, and there wasn't like a proper sort of investigation, and that there were reasons for them to like cover this up. So in one of the more kind of amusing sort of dark scenes, like Mason basically forces this guy's hand, so he gets like George's body and tosses him like on the golf course where this guy's playing, but he also adds like another injury, like a head injury. So then they obviously have to take him into the morgue, and it's a way to sort of force his hand into another like I forget the word for when they examine like dead people. I know there's a name for it, but it's slipping my mind. But that's sort of the crux of it. But yeah, throughout the episode, Perry Mason's trying to find more evidence to do with this fourth man and the case in general. They know there is a fourth man because of the blood leading like upwards out of the apartment, and down the fire escape, and then they found the dried blood outside. So they know then someone escaped from the scene. So obviously the same someone who killed George. So they know there's a person out there, and the fourth man. And at one point, Stephen Root's character, even though like his side are pretty confident then they don't have anything, it at least puts a bit of pressure on him. And there's a great scene actually when he gets together with like the detectives and the various players in like a bathroom, and he just unloads on them, and Root is really good at just hamming it up, but also playing this quite twisted, like intimidating figure as well, because he just demands to know who did it. He tells them about that Oliver's team are saying they've got something on us, like, and he mentions the fourth man, and they say to him, well, we're not sure who did it, which is interesting because it rules one of them out, because of course, as in the original kidnapping of the baby. So it rules one of them out because there's no reason why they would lie to the district attorney who appears to be in or at least have knowledge of all this business. But yeah, the district attorney played by Stephen Root is really like aggravated in this scene. He kind of, gets it across then, because they're saying, well, we don't know, but they have nothing basically, and he's just like really uptight and furious, they better have nothing basically. But as I said, getting back to Oliver, we see the stress throughout the episode, because another quite interesting scene is with Drella, where they just blow up at each other, and Drella's kind of finally at the end of the tether, and I think it paints this picture. She's actually one of the more interesting characters, Drella, because she obviously is a woman in a largely male sort of world, and in this episode we see her blow up and just get a bit fed up with maybe being taken for granted. She's very kind of protective of Emily as well. She always has been, the way she's been treated, and she just blows up at one point, Oliver, reminding him, hey, you're her lawyer, so why don't you start acting like it? And I think in general this episode just shows that the case is getting on top of Oliver. He's obviously struggling to come up with anything to protect and get his client off. And yeah, the years are piling up on him. I think Lithgow really gets that across very well. And at the end of the episode, it's not a total surprise because there has been a build up to this point, but a little bit of a surprise just because you wouldn't necessarily think this is something they would do with this character. But he goes home and he commits suicide. That's the end of the episode. Yeah, it's almost like the case got too much for him and everything else in his life just piled up. So it's a really powerful ending, actually, because I think largely this show is quite sort of tongue-in-cheek and very like pulpy noir, although obviously that there are darker moments too. But yeah, that ending really hits home quite well. I think it lands well, I think. And again, that sort of I think hints that maybe by the end of episode 8 Mason's going to take over, because he obviously has this great respect and admiration for Oliver, and so you can see Perry Mason becoming obviously a lawyer and taking Oliver's job. But yeah, interesting to see next week or the next episode what sort of fallout there is from this. I think that's mostly, couple bits with Sister Alice. I think her stuff in this episode, it really gets into like the sexism just on another level, because she sort of gets like crowded down by, people like Beggary and various characters behind the scene at the church. And I can't remember if it's Beggary or one of the other, but at one point he basically says, we can't let hysterical women like rule or something, some really sexist, like dickish line like that. And it's the fallout from last week where she had like the sort of epileptic fit on stage, and before that her kind of mad statement that she is going to resurrect the baby Charlie. And it's kind of an interesting thing because she seemingly believes this, Sister Alice, but like looking behind her motives, it probably is just another way to try and manipulate things. But I think it's such a good performance from Tatiana Maslany, then it's a little bit open. I think the character might be such an extreme character that she might actually believe she can do this, or it could just be like a tool to again manipulate things. But again, there's pressure on her to like step away from Emily and renounce Emily because of the allegations against her. But yeah, in the end, Sister Alice does turn the tables on them, because as she recovers, they kind of force her to make a statement, and so that they give her like a pre-prepared statement, and like there's this whole press gathering outside like the house or mansion or wherever it is, and it's quite a notable visual moment because you get a group of like sort of guards like in between her and the people outside and the press, so you get like this wall of males like guarding her from the outside world, and she's sort of making this statement, but the people on the other side are kind of saying, you know, we can't hear you, speak up. So in the end, she like walks past the security guys or the police, whatever they are, and she actually then makes a statement, and that's when she like goes into business for herself again. She returns to the idea of resurrecting Charlie because there's this guy at the front, who's like one of her big supporters, and he like bows down to her, and he starts like peddling the same sort of like idea of resurrection, bringing him back. So it's at that moment Alice just can't resist. She's like being seduced again by this like worshipper. So that's when she goes back to like going against the script basically, which is going to cause further sort of uproar. But it is that sort of interesting thing here, because even though Sister Alice is like an extremist sort of figure and like manipulating things all the time, at the same time we are seeing this her being them trying to shut her down, and we are seeing kind of this sexist sort of like attitude that is just trying to censor her basically, whether you agree or don't agree with what she's saying and or what she's doing. Yeah, it does sort of highlight that sort of sexism at this time when it comes to even something like religion. The fact that someone like Sister Alice, you know, could be shut down, and the whole hysterical women line. So there you have it. So interesting stuff, I think. Once again, sort of a powerful ending with Oliver. Not necessarily the best episode, but I thought the stuff with Oliver particularly was good, and the ending. So that's Perry Mason episode 4. I'll be back soon with episode 5, the next couple of days hopefully. But yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.